Hey, we got some college football playoff rankings last night. Got the second edition of the college football playoff rankings, and I think what we need to start looking at here is, yes, it's week 2. Yes, it's going to kind of play itself out, and we understand that. But what I'm curious about here is what can we learn from these rankings? Because it's kind of a mind game, right? Of you're trying to assess, like, okay, what is the committee really valuing here? Is it strength of schedule? Is it record? Is it resume? Is it eye test? All this. I want to kind of unpack this little by little here, and we'll start with just where the top 6 stand right now. You had Ohio State at 1. I don't know how you drop them after the way that they played against Rutgers. Yeah, slow start, but their resume is still the best in the country. We'll talk more about that later. Georgia, based on resume, probably fair to have them at 2. Their real run here is going to happen in the next couple of weeks with top 10 Ole Miss, with Tennessee. They had a win last week against the top 15 Missouri team. Like, Georgia is in career fair mode right now. They're putting that resume together. I'm fine with them at 2. Michigan at number 3. They were ranked 3 the week before because of dominance. They were dominant yet again against Purdue. Season starts now for Michigan. If they go undefeated and run the table, they should be in the college football playoff. Plain and simple. Same thing with Florida State. They're at number 4. Luxury is the number to the right of their logo is much more important than the number to the left right now. Ranking is fine. If you're 5 next week, don't worry. If you're 3 next week, who cares? You went out, you go undefeated. Handle business. Same thing for Washington. The whole Ohio State-Michigan thing is going to handle itself. You would imagine if you handle business, you'll be in there. Same thing with Oregon. They control their own destiny. The Big 12 threw them a bone by having a conference champ now that will not be undefeated. So you avoid that 4 undefeated conference champion scenario because the other undefeated is Washington, and you're going to play them likely, again, if you both take care of business and end up in the Pac-12 title. So kind of win in your in scenario. So that's kind of what happened. That's the way this whole format looks right now. No changes. And there was so much, I always think it's funny, man. There's so much kickback whenever these rankings drop. So much, well, we should be ranked ahead of them. Are you kidding me? And there's all this outrage. And I think the outrage is real, and I don't have any issue with the emotion. I mean, we have the same kind of emotion on this show. Emotion is what makes college football, for goodness sakes. That's why we love it. But all this rankings talk is a little bit funny because look at this top 6. 1 through 6 control their own destiny for the college football playoff. And even past that, like 7 and 8, Texas and Bama, if you win out, you feel pretty good about your chances to get in. So I understand there's so much frustration about, like, well, are they really watching the games? Are they really like us watching college football? The answer is probably not, to be honest with you. Like, they probably aren't waking up for college game day or big noon and then dialing in for the rest of the day and staying up for Pac-12 after dark. They're probably not like us in that sense. But I do also think that the rankings eventually kind of play themselves out. So when it comes to like how they're putting these together, here's what I can deduce so far. 1, resume is kind of the end-all be-all. The differentiator for them is why Ohio State is at 1. Right under that is the eye test. That's why Georgia's at 2, Michigan's at 3. That's why Oregon is as high as they are with where they're at right now. But I think to put a finer point on what we said about resumes, the key learning for me to this point through these rankings is the College Football Playoff Committee is freezing wins. Now, what does that mean, freezing wins? It means whenever you beat a team, whatever they were ranked at that point in time, the committee values that ranking. Florida State, perfect example. When they beat top 5 LSU, the committee saw that as a top 5 win. Now, LSU has dropped now to a top 15 team, or a top 20 team, rather, with them being number 19 at this point in time. They're not giving them credit for beating a number 19 LSU. They're giving them credit for being a top 5 LSU. And the reason why I know that is if they didn't freeze the resumes, I think you would flip-flop Washington and Florida State. Because the frozen resumes at this point in time, for Florida State, again, if you're freezing the team's ranking when they beat them, top 5 win over Florida State, ranked win over Duke when they were number 16. For Washington, top 10 win over Oregon, nice win, a ranked win on the road at number 20 USC. So that's fine. Based on the way that thing is set up right now, if you're freezing resumes, yeah, Florida State has a better resume than Washington. I think the eye test is probably back and forth with the way they've looked at this point in the year. But if you go ahead and unfreeze those resumes and you say, okay, well, we're going to keep a running tally of where LSU is and what the teams that Washington played are doing and what Oregon, how that win looks, then I think you flip-flop them because the resume for Florida State then would be a win over a number 19 LSU and no other ranked wins. Now we understand there's more context to this conversation when it comes to what the ACC is doing and all that. For Washington, they have a win over number 6 Oregon if you unfreeze their resume and no other ranked wins. And to be real, I think the Pac-12 is a little bit of a better conference to this point in the year than what the ACC is bringing to the table. by nature of where we're standing right now with 2 Pac-12 teams in that top 6. So I don't have a problem with them freezing the wins, to be honest with you. If I were running the show, if I were Boo Corrigan, who's featured in that lower third, if y'all wondering who that is in that picture, those y'all watching live on YouTube, I'm for freezing wins. And the reason why that is I think psyche is so crucial in college football. And it sounds funny to say that, but we forget now, these are 18 to 22-year-olds. The mental and emotional state of where these players are at from a week-to-week basis matters a whole lot. And that is directly correlated in my mind to where they're ranked. Now, different teams handle it different ways, but I think the best case study on this could be Colorado. Colorado is a totally different team from when they were 3-0 to when they just lost to Oregon State. And I don't mean from a roster perspective. I don't mean from a health perspective. I'm saying psyche is so crucial week to week in college football. You would much rather play Colorado today than when they were ranked in that 3-0 conversation and they were rolling and we're talking about, well, how good is Colorado really going to be? Not because the roster's different, not because they have more or less talent, but because when your psyche is at a point where you are considered to be a ranked team or you're a top 5 LSU, you perceive yourself a certain way. Like what people are saying about you, you try and block out the noise as best you can, and the best teams in the country, they have the same psyche every single week. But I think Colorado is a much more difficult opponent when they were 3-0 than they are right now. And so I'm not saying that we should just totally, excuse a team that starts the year ranked and finishes unranked and how we assess that win. But I do think freezing wins probably makes the most sense because momentum is crucial in college football. Another example of this, you would much rather play Oklahoma right now after 2 losses than that week where they played Texas. Like Oklahoma, they showed up that week against Texas. I don't know if anybody's beaten Oklahoma that day. Hyperbolic, sure. They were playing their best football that day. They're not playing their best football right now. A lot of it has to do with psyche and losing and winning and how you're perceived from a ranking standpoint. So all in all to say is I think that LSU was a tougher team in week 2 than they are right now. That's how I feel. Now, you could probably debate me on that, and we go back and forth and have a good time talking about it, but I think LSU being a top 5 team with aspirations to play for the college football playoff and win the SEC, and now having just lost to Alabama and being a top 20 team, I'm not saying LSU won't still fight like heck. I think Brian Kelly will have that operation ready to go. But going back to this conversation around freezing and unfreezing resumes, I'm not for the whole thought that, well, Florida State, they beat a top 5 LSU team, but actually LSU is not really that good. LSU was plenty good when they played against them, I promise you. I promise you, that team was ready to roll on that day, and Florida State just got the better of them. Same thing with Colorado. The way that they approached those first couple of games, they were a better operation then from a psychological standpoint than they are right now. And I think you can look at the way that they've gone out the rest of the season for both those teams. And I think we're going to see different teams respond different ways. But again, the way you practice, the way you perceive yourself, the way you talk about yourself, what you have to play for, you get a better challenge when the psyche is in a positive standpoint than when it's in a negative standpoint. So when it comes to the whole freezing wins conversation, that's why I'm for it. It's not a thing where week to week you get the exact same team. It's not like you just plug and play week to week of the same attributes, it's not 99 overall every single week. It varies week to week based on your psyche and based on health and all that, but I do think that freezing wins ultimately is the right call. So do we have things that we object to with the college football playoff rankings? Sure. Would I value eye test more? Yes, absolutely. We have our own college football playoff rankings we do on this very show on Sunday. We have Georgia as the number 1 team because of the eye test. I think they would beat Ohio State tomorrow if they played them. That's how I feel. But I understand with this committee, you're trying to keep it as black and white as possible, and the eye test is factored into some degree. So as a whole, what we learned from the college football playoff rankings, resume is first, eye test probably second. But when it comes to resume, they're freezing your wins. Very, very important now as we go on through the rest of the schedule because you got a lot of teams now with a backloaded schedule, Georgia being one of them, Washington being one of them. We'll see how this thing shakes out. It's going to be a lot of fun. But again, those top 6, man, those top 6 all control their own destiny. So whether you're 6 or whether you're 1, if you're upset with where you're ranked, I would say go 1-0, check back next week, and keep that thing going all the way till Selection Sunday. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.